I know it's pantomime season, but how do you account for the chaos in Britain? Whilst a man, a homeless man, a man who was working but homeless, was dying on the steps of the Houses of Parliament, the entire show came to a halt with lip readers drafted in from everywhere, according to your political taste, to ascertain what the leader of the opposition said or didn't say under his breath, inaudibly, with lip readers being the only clue to what was said. Jeremy Corbyn, 35 years in Parliament, leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, said nothing in the House of Commons. At least that's what the official record shows. But the entire joke of a British mainstream media industry spent that day and the next day and part of this day analysing what his lips indicated he might have said. Now, I'm here to tell you, as someone who has known Corbyn for almost 40 years, coming up actually to 40 years, that number one, he's the most politically correct, achingly politically correct individual I have ever had the fortune or misfortune to meet. And secondly, he is not a liar. So you'd be well advised to believe him when he tells you that he said people, not woman. Mind you, I don't approve of how he handled it all. I would have called an immediate press conference and said the following. I did not call her a stupid woman, but now that I've got your attention, let me do so. And let me do so for the following reasons. Let me count the ways. And he would have still been adumbrating the ways in which she is a stupid woman. Come midnight that night, he might even have been able to stretch it out until the morning. But that's not how Corbyn operates. He prefers the human punch bag approach, soaking up the punishment which led to the brouhaha that you have all seen. Belatedly, he did come out fighting, and I think did a much better job. All I'm going to say is down my street, every person, man or woman, thinks we have a stupid Prime Minister, a stupid government that has led us to the situation where, according to the United Nations, a significant number of our children are hungry, an even more significant number of our children are living in poverty. Our pensioners are shivering in the bleak midwinter. Brexit is a dog's breakfast. You try saying that. Brexit is collapsing the British Constitution around our ears. We have no idea, just 90-odd days to go, whether we're Brexiting or not, the basis of that Brexiting, which government, which Prime Minister will be leading us as we slip our moorings from more than 40 years in the European Union. All of that, plus Gatwick. Now, I'm going to talk to Tamer later, because quite apart from all of his many sides, it turns out that Tamer is a drone pilot. I can tell you, because we've had eyes on him, that he is definitely not responsible for the chaos at Gatwick Airport. And at the time of broadcasting, absolutely nobody has any idea who it is, what it is. Nobody has even seen a picture of the drone in question. That Trident nuclear submarine fleet has done a great job of defending us from this threat to our national income and the well-being of our people, hasn't it? 350,000 people have had their Christmas, New Year, holiday disrupted or even ruined by something the size of a pack of cards that you can buy in Halfords, I understand. Other stores are available for £19.99. You couldn't make this up. A country that wants to Brexit and sail off to reconquer the world, commercially speaking, culturally speaking, cannot defend its second airport from a piece of plastic junk off the shelves in Haverford for £19.99. We can't shoot it down. Our eagles are not trained enough to bring it down. And although we can block people's telephone signals in the arrivals hall inside the airport, we cannot, apparently, electronically block the drone from flying over the airfields. I've never heard anything quite like it. Have you? And where was the government? I mean, I know they're busy and all that, but here was our second airport under attack. Tens, maybe hundreds of millions of pounds worth of business being lost or prejudiced, and it took 20 hours for any government minister to step forward and explain. And who did they put forward? Chris Grayling. What could possibly go wrong? Chris Grayling is in command of the situation. We'll be looking too across the pond at Donald Trump, who has just kept his promise, and it's brought the house down on top of him. He promised repeatedly, every night actually, every afternoon and every night, and in every interview, that he would end America's wars abroad and concentrate on America itself. He'd build a wall. He'd defend America's borders. He'd make America great again. He'd bring back jobs. He'd re-industrialize the Rust Belt. These were the promises that he made, and at least in regard to the wars in Afghanistan and Syria, he has announced that he's going to keep that promise. Q. Mad Dog Mattis, that's his name, Mad Dog Mattis, the Defense Secretary of the United States, resigning in a huff. And every liberal in America, from Mia Farrow to Bette Midler to every pussy-hatted protester against Trump, has suddenly embraced somebody called General Mad Dog Mattis. And the American left and the Hollywood liberals are demanding that Trump stays at war. You couldn't make it up, could you? I certainly would never have imagined that such a state of affairs could ever come into being. But it has. This evening, the liberal chatterati and the deep state securitati are in open embrace against Trump for pulling American forces from their illegal occupation of a part of Syria. Now, we'll be analysing what all of that means, amongst others with Patrick Cockburn, the journalist and Middle East correspondent for The Independent, who may or may not agree with me. I suspect that for the first time on these matters, he apparently disagrees with me, and that's good. We'll be canvassing that, because this is free speech radio. This is the last free space in the mainstream media, at least for now. We'll also be talking about Donald Trump's war record itself with Dr. John Nagl, headmaster of the Haverford School, but a former lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. I've often thought it was odd that Trump was so ready to second-guess soldiers in the field, to rubbish other people's war record, like John McCain, for example, when he himself has no war record at all. Not that he couldn't have had one. He could have served in Vietnam like the rest of his generation that went into politics. But he had bad ankles, don't you know? He had spurs on his ankles, don't you know? He got 7 deferments from serving in the US military because his ankles just weren't up to it. Not that that stopped him golfing every day of his presidency, usually in his own golf courses. And we'll be talking about that wall. Now, let me put something on the table that the Liberals amongst you will not approve. Donald Trump is entitled to build a wall, not just along the Mexican border, which, it's easy for me to remember this one, is 1954 miles long. 1954, the year I was born, 1954 would be the length of the wall. He's entitled to build a wall around the entirety of the United States, and guess what? I rather wish he would. Metaphorically, at least. He's entitled to decide who comes into the United States. He's entitled to decide who's not allowed in to the United States. He's entitled to do whatever he likes within the laws and constitution of the United States in his own country. My problem with Trump is what he does in other people's countries. But the wall has become a totemic, emblematic controversy in the United States, so much so that a man who has set up a GoFundMe to go fund the wall, to build this wall along the border with Mexico. Frankly, I think the Mexicans would be relieved because Trump was insisting that they would be paying for it. GoFundMe. Well, I could swear if it wasn't so early in the evening, because it's swearing that many on the left and centre in American politics are doing about the idea of this wall, or that the public should fund it. So it's a kind of Donald Trump night, but it's also the pantomime season, at least in Parliament. Donald Trump has announced that the American forces will rather rapidly be withdrawn from their illegal presence in Syria, and some people think it's an affront to what? I'm not sure. Let's check with the doyen of foreign correspondents, Patrick Cockburn, foreign correspondent of the year most years. He's journalist and Middle East correspondent for the Independent newspaper. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you.
It is an illegal presence. Why would anyone object to its ending?
Well, it was always a strange American position there, stuck up in northeast Syria. It was never going to be permanent, and it depended on this alliance with the Kurds against ISIS. It's a bit surprising that people are expressing so much astonishment that it's now coming to an end, because it was always going to be temporary.
Yeah, but the Defense Secretary has resigned, and Mad Dog Mattis is now a liberal icon in America.
Yes, I know, that's strange. The American presence there was sort of accidental. Mattis and other members of the foreign policy establishment in Washington wanted it to continue. But they didn't seem to know what to do with it. It was opposed by the Syrian government in Damascus. It was threatened by the Turks, who object to the American cooperation with the Kurds in northeast Syria. It was opposed by the Russians. It was opposed by Iran. This was a very isolated venture. So it was always rather strange that there was so much unanimity in the American establishment about staying there.
Tell us this, Patrick. Does this have any relationship to the Khashoggi affair? Because one sees reports that Trump has coordinated this move with President Erdogan of Turkey. He's still extremely sore about what happened in Istanbul to the American newspaper columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Do you see anything in that, or is that a conspiracy theory?
I think there is a connection, which isn't a conspiracy, but it may not be initially obvious, which is this. When Trump became president, he bet heavily on Saudi Arabia and crowned Prince Mohammed bin Salman as the big American ally in the Middle East against Iran. And that's been coming apart because of evidence of Saudi ineptitude and violence, culminating in the extraordinary murder by a Saudi death squad of Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. And this has, exposed Saudi Arabia as a country that can't really be a useful U.S. ally. So Trump has to look for a new ally in the region. So he has much better reason for good relations with Turkey. So I think it is related in that way.
Now, of course, the Kurds are, over recent history, certainly of our lifetime, have been picked up, put down by big powers many, many times. Does this decision by Trump represent them being abandoned again?
Yes, they are being abandoned. Used as cannon fodder against ISIS. It was always predictable that this might happen. But it wasn't obvious what the Kurds should do about this. I mean, I was in northeast Syria talking to the Kurds there about this earlier this year, and they couldn't really see a way out. I mean, these are quite tough and experienced people. They knew that the Americans weren't going to support them forever. If the U.S. had to choose between supporting 2 million Kurds in northeast Syria and Turkey with 80 million people, a member of NATO and a large army, you don't have to think about it long to realize which way the Americans are going to go. So the Kurds could see that happening, but they couldn't see a way out. The only direction they could go is to negotiate with Assad in Damascus to bring Syrian troops back up to the border to prevent a Turkish invasion. But the Americans wouldn't allow them to do that. And also they thought, since the American representatives kept on saying they would stay, they didn't think there was any need for that. So what they're going to do now is to go back to Damascus to, I imagine, to bring back the Syrian army into northeast Syria.
Well, that would seem to me the logical solution, but there are reports today that they have appealed to the rather beleaguered President Macron of France to fill the gap that President Trump's withdrawal will leave.
Well, that's kind of an act of desperation, isn't it? I don't think that they really believe that the French are going to replace the Americans. I guess they're looking for help from any direction. I don't think they've got much option but to go to Damascus, but they've left it a bit late in the day.
Now, what about the Afghan announcement? That seems to have also been a trigger for Mattis's departure and for a hue and cry from what we might call the military-industrial complex. But again, Trump is only really making good on his campaign promise and also recognizing the reality, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that this is being portrayed in a lot of the media as a sort of impulsive betrayal by Trump, as if these were, successful military campaigns. You know, the U.S. has been in Afghanistan for 17 years and has not won. Indeed, it's on the retreat. It's been in Syria for a shorter time, but has also failed there. So, it's perfectly reasonable for Trump to say, well, I'm just being politically realistic. These generals who say no stay, but they don't have any alternative policy. They're really just saying what they always say in these circumstances, which are just stick it out and hope for something to turn up.
We're here because we're here because we're here. We're here to guard the graves of the people who fell because we were here. Okay,
no, exactly.
Thank you, Patrick. As always, a rare pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for helping us through that. That's Patrick Cockburn, the journalist, Middle East correspondent for The Independent, on Trump's withdrawal from both Syria and Afghanistan. Has the benefit of being what he said he would do. I say hallelujah when a politician keeps their promises. But let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. As I said earlier, the liberal chatterati are up in arms. They say it's all because Trump is a puppet of Putin. They never actually deign to deal with the fact that on multiple other levels, not least the nuclear weapons level, Trump is actually confronting Russia in the Ukraine by withdrawing from the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, confronting Russia on the European mainland, confronting Russia with sanctions after sanctions after sanctions. How that squares with him being Putin's puppet, I really don't know. Let's hear from Darren in Leeds. Go ahead, Darren.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I just want to talk about, again, what your guest was just talking about. I think Trump has pulled a blinder. He's done a maverick move once again. And whatever his reasons behind doing it, it's a big quiver for his re-election. And it's a good move, one, as it ends the regime change wars. Two of them, at least, hopefully. It gives the establishment on both sides a bloody nose, and he's fulfilled, or hopefully fulfilled, one of his campaign promises, which the previous President Obama, he promised to get troops out of Afghanistan, and he didn't fulfill it. So now, as you mentioned yourself, Liberals' heads are exploding all over.
It is extraordinary, I must say. Bette Midler, Mia Farrow, a whole parade of the Hollywood literati, glitterati, chatterati, liberalati are demanding that American forces stay in their illegal occupation of Syria, that they fight on for what is not at all clear.
No, and the hypocrisy, it's astonishing. I mean, you've got George Bush now, the hero of the resistance. I won't be surprised.
George Bush, Comey, General Mad Dog Mattis, they're all liberal icons now, don't you know?
Yeah, it's bizarro world.
Talk about losing your moorings. Really, their hatred of Trump is such that if Trump said it was Friday, they would denounce it as a lie.
Well, George, I'll say this. You might not agree with me on this, but just watch. See if Corbyn gets elected next year or the year after. You will have the same issues here with certain people who will go mad no matter what Corbyn does, even if it's a good thing. I mean, we've already kind of got it in the media over this trivial, stupid woman comment. I mean, anyone who has a brain can see, when you're negotiating a deal, you don't, keep giving away stuff to the people who want you to remain, and that's what she's done, regardless of what you agree on. But on a side note, and when are you coming to Leeds on you and Ken?
On my tour? Well, we've not any plans to do so. Our next one is the 26th of January in Neath in the Gwyn Hall, and the next night in the Old Rep Theatre in Birmingham. That's on the 27th. So 26th in Neath and 27th in Birmingham. But who knows, we may turn up in Leeds at some point, Darren. Thank you very much for asking. That was Darren in Leeds. Give me your point of view, 0344 499 1000. Or email me through the website at talkradio.co.uk. You can text the word talk followed by your message to 87222 if you've got 25 pence plus normal sending charges. You can tweet Talk Radio. You can tweet at George Galloway. There's even a facebook.com/talkradiou.uk. By the way, my crowdfunding smashed through its target last Sunday, and my film Killing Kelly will very soon begin. Now, I spoke earlier about the state of total chaos at Britain's second biggest airport, Gatwick Airport, where 350,000 people have already had their holiday either completely ruined or severely delayed. And it's only Friday night. There's still a few days left to go, and I was raising some, I hope, pertinent questions about how we're so woefully unprepared for this sort of thing, as if it was beyond our imagination that anyone, ill-wisher, terrorist, commercial wrecker, opponent, climate change activist, environmentalist, could be anybody. Who is it? Well, they certainly haven't found out. But I found out that Tamer, my producer, is a qualified drone pilot. I've seen his certificate. It's true. And I'm going to ask him now to answer some of my questions. Tamer, thank you for this. First of all, explain, please, why you're a drone pilot.
I run a production company, so one of the many things that we do is video production and photography. So we need to be able to get access to areas that we wouldn't necessarily get to and get some beautiful shots. So, that's the main reason for doing it.
Now, you know that it's unlawful to fly over an airport. Or
yes, so there was so it is. So a couple of months ago, in fact, I think it was in the summer, new regulation came in that said that there had to be a 1 kilometre boundary around any active airfield. So that's 0.6 miles. You cannot fly anywhere within that. The problem with that, and as a member of RPAS, which is kind of the lobbying, the kind of the group for us pilots, this is a big problem for us because obviously drones have a maximum ceiling operational flight legally when you have your certification up to 400 feet. Now, obviously, within a 1 kilometre space, if you're in a commercial area like Gatwick or Heathrow, that can vary greatly. So even if you're flying at 400 feet just outside the boundaries of the airport, the restricted airspace, you could still potentially be causing problems within a flight path or a landing.
And do you have to have the license that you've got in order to fly one of these things?
No. So this is another problem. The reason that we have it is because we use it for commercial operations. So this is permission for commercial operations. So this allows us to go out. We have to do very stringent checks and tests. We have to go through a whole process. It took us 3 days to get our licenses. It costs a lot of money to do it, but that means that we can go off and film stuff commercially for clients. Obviously, with that means that we're insured and we're covered and all that kind of stuff is supported. But this is a hobbyist thing, and this is where the problem lies. Drones can cost anywhere from £15 on a shelf upwards to £15,000 depending on the kind of drone that you need for the operation that you do. Most people will spend on average, and especially now that the technology is getting better, will probably spend around 150 quid on a drone.
Now, someone is, let's assume, by the way, because I've not seen a picture of this drone, someone is flying over Gatwick Airport for a nefarious purpose. It's not an accident because it seems to have happened repeatedly. Certainly the airport and flights have been grounded and the airport even closed repeatedly. Why is it so difficult to find out who's doing it? Why can't the airport electronically block or jam this device from flying over its territory? Why can't it be shot down?
Okay, so to the first point, why can't you find out who's doing it? There are multiple reasons. First of all, there has to be a secure link between the drone and the remote control. So that link...
So if you trace the
you can't trace the remote control because it's
even though it's emitting a signal?
Yeah, because there are billions of signals that are being emitted. So you can't hone in. If you don't know what the frequency of that signal is, you cannot emit or counter that or find it or triangulate it, because everybody's got a mobile phone, there are mobile masts, there's going to be huge amounts of interference. So if you opened your laptop now and just looked at the Wi-Fi, just Wi-Fi, by the way, interference is here, you will have a list of at least 50, guaranteed, and that's just Wi-Fi. So imagine radio frequencies around an airport, right? So you've got the ground crew, you've got air traffic control, you've got the pilots, you've got internal security, external security, police forces, British Transport Police, all of those working on radio frequencies. There is a way that you can isolate and send, and there has been talk about this. There are a couple of companies that do anti-drone anti-drone kind of mechanisms that will hone in on a drone. They'll have high frequency cameras, thermal imaging, and they'll be able to pick out a drone, and they can send a disruptive radio wave directly at the drone that will then disrupt it and knock it out of the sky. But short of that, I mean, you still need to find
Well, you
the drone.
say short of that, but why would an airport not already have invested in that technology?
Because the technology has gone into consumer so much quicker than anybody thought it would. Drones, you can manufacture a drone on a printer now, on a 3D printer. You can actually get a CAD design on the web and download that information and print it on a computer. So CAD, for those that don't know, is computer-aided design. So you can actually go off and create a whole image. And
I understand that, but this is the second biggest airport in Britain. Tens, maybe hundreds of millions of pounds have been cost. 350,000 of people have had their holidays ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't the airport have the means that you've just described of bringing this down?
Because that technology is not necessarily 100% accurate yet. You know, it's not been tested. The technology, the consumer technology, is moving a lot quicker. And actually, this is something that the military has been dealing with for a long time. So the military has even admitted that they are worried about the acceleration of these devices in the consumer marketplace because they don't have control of that technology and they cannot see where it's going because people can take different elements of it. There was an attack on the Venezuelan Prime Minister a couple of months ago using a drone with explosives.
Okay, but Venezuela's Venezuela. This is Britain,
but it's
one of
not,
the
though,
biggest, one of the biggest countries in the world, one of the biggest economies in the world, with a strong state, strong security services, beleaguered and besieged by terrorists on all fronts, and ready to go to war with Russia, but we can't fight a drone.
Drones are very, very, very difficult. First of all, the conventional ways of dealing with threats like this would have been anti-aircraft. So you would have had anti-aircraft missiles, you would have had the Reapers, all of that kind of stuff. These are the missiles technology that would have been used. You're not going to spend £500,000 on a rocket to take down a £200 drone. Right now,
well,
I take your point.
The cost of that this
absolutely.
drone has exacted is far more than that.
If you had 10 drone attacks a day, or 10 drone incursions a day on an airport, and each rocket is £500,000, or each missile.
Yeah, okay.
Where does that leave
mean,
us?
if we are, as you describe, defenceless against
we are, and
this,
I don't think it's just us. I think it's the whole world.
Well,
Nobody really knows.
Then there should be no drones. Your license should be taken off you. There should be a complete ban on drones if we can't defend against them being used for illegal and deeply destructive purposes.
There is an argument for that, and that's one of the things that RPAS does, is lobbying government for changing legislation in order to make sure that the people that are operating drones are safe and qualified. But George, you've got to remember that this isn't a new thing. There have been hobbyists that fly remote control helicopters and fly remote control planes. This technology has existed for some time. The problem that we have with drone technology is that it's GPS locked. It's very difficult to understand the feeling of the aircraft because it's such an easy thing to fly. It's like playing a video game. So you have no feeling of what the wind is doing. You have no kind of real orientation. If your camera's broken, it's very difficult to see. Once I get my drone up to about 10 meters, it becomes difficult to see. And by the way, you know, the whole point of this certification is to be able to work within parameters. So we can only fly within 500 meters within visual line of sight. So we cannot fly the drone without visual line. If we can't see the drone, we're breaking the law. We can't go above 400 meters. There are restrictions to if there's congested areas, if there are vehicles. So all of these things are in place for people, for us to do that kind of
but
thing.
if you're doing it for nefarious purpose,
if you're a hobbyist,
yeah, but this is not a hobby, is it? This
it's
is
not
someone committing a crime, and we can't expect them to be obeying the regulations.
No.
Let me just put this last point to you. Such is the state of public opinion about our government, about our state. There are a significant number of people out there who wonder whether this is real or not. They wonder if it's some kind of false flag or not. What's your take on that?
I think it'd be very unlikely that it was a false flag. I think there are obviously people that have an idea or not. But look, drones can cause significant damage to aircraft. And significant damage to aircraft, especially commercial aircraft, means significant loss of life. there is no, irrespective of how you feel about certain elements, there is no margin for error when it comes to something like this. People's lives are at stake. Not only are the pilots are responsible for their lives. If pilots can't see the drone, they're travelling at a speed. It's very easy for a drone to get sucked in, and not all of them are plastic. A lot of them are made from components, and there have been DJI, who's the major manufacturer for most of the kind of commercial drones, so the prosumer, if you like, most people will buy a DJI drone of some description, have done tests on this, and they've seen that the damage that's caused to aircraft engines, to windscreens, to canopies of cockpits, they can be majorly significant.
Even birds can bring down aircraft,
so
and they're
imagine,
made of soft tissue and
exactly, and struck
and
in
bone.
the wrong place. Yeah. It's horrific. So whether you, and like I said, everybody's talking about, well, we haven't seen a picture, we haven't done this, we haven't done that. You don't need to. I mean, a drone sighting can be a flicker. Do you know what I mean? You can just see something, a flash. They can disappear so quickly. Like I said to you, when I get my drone up to 10 meters, 15 meters, it becomes very difficult for me to then, if I look away from the drone, it's very difficult for me then to find the drone again. So,
how far away from the scene of the crime does the operator have to be? I mean, what's the radius?
It depends
that
on the
police
drone.
Must be looking.
Yeah, it really depends on the drone. Now, as I said, for people that have certification, they cannot fly more than 500 meters within visual line of sight radius. Drones can, so for my drone, for example, which isn't necessarily the most expensive, the biggest one, has got a range of 7 miles radius.
So a 7-mile radius would be required to find you.
Yeah, exactly. And the drone is intrinsically linked to the remote control. But remember, these drones can be programmed for GPS setup. So I could actually plot a route, put it into my remote control, and set the drone off flying, and I don't need to be anywhere near it.
Well, that is fascinating, if a little dismaying, I must say. Let's see if anyone has a point of view on it, shall we? 0344 499 1000. We've got a caller coming up. Here's a tweet from Sean Caden in Australia. Glad to see Tamer has been let out of the locked broom cupboard. He served his penance and seemingly learnt his lesson.
What did I do? I just want to know what I've done.
Let's hear from Dion in Slough in Berkshire. Go ahead, Dion.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah,
Evening.
Listening to your producer, Tamer, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, he seems to know his time. I've got a drone myself, but it's not commercial one. It's not expensive.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what it did cost, Dion, just as a matter of interest?
It's about...
Or do you not want the wife to know?
Penny short of £50.
£50 drone, right.
And that's got a HD camera and that. I don't use it a lot. It's just something to play with indoors, or if it's summer, I'll go on a communal lawn outside and mess about with it.
Okay. So what do you think about this situation at Gatwick then?
Yeah, but like I say, your producer explained it better than anyone else has the last couple of days. I suppose, it's the expense. 'Cause when I phoned in, I was saying, why didn't they just scramble a couple of Typhoons, have a Sidewinder missile and shoot it down or something? But
well, the problem, as Tamer says, the people doing this might have 100 drones.
Exactly, yeah.
You can't fire a Sidewinder at 100 drones.
Plus the cost of scrambling Eurofighters, and firing off a Sidewinder, and especially if those Sidewinders aren't missed. Remember, Sidewinders
I'm
are
not that
heat-seeking
sympathetic
missiles.
to the cost issue, because the cost of this has already run into tens of millions. It must have.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, yes. And mainly it's inconvenience to families and other people, like...
Yeah, by the way, Tamer, what's the maximum punishment these people could look forward to?
5 years, from what I understand, if you fly within a restricted airspace area. And remember, there are different classes of airspace, but the airports, if you're flying over the airport, then it's 5 years minimum.
But I'm actually right next to the flight path where I live for Heathrow.
You better be careful then, Dion.
No, I wouldn't do anything like that. I just mainly just play with it indoors, keep the eye brain.
I can hear a siren. I can hear a siren wailing and a police car drawing up outside your door right now. Thanks for your call, my friend. Alec is in Norwich. Alec, go ahead.
Hello there, George. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. These drones, you can build one. You don't need to buy one off the shelf.
Well, if they're that cheap, it's scarcely worth bothering building it.
Well, if you buy a commercial one, it will be geofence. You can't fly it near an airport.
You can. It comes up with a geofence warning. So obviously, if you have a contract with an airport, for example, and you need to get some aerial shots, then your drone is pretty useless if it's geofence. So actually, what happens is on the app when you go to launch the drone, it'll say this area is geofenced. This is a restricted area. Do you want to still continue? This is a Class A. C, D, E airspace or whatever it is that'll come up, and then you just say yes.
Is your suspicion, Alec, that it's a homemade thing? Who might be behind this kind of thing?
Well, it could be custom made as opposed to homemade. I think is a better description. But it'd be interesting to hear. Somebody must, I say, would claim responsibility for this.
Not yet.
It can be pre-programmed. It can have you could.
I'm just waiting for them to blame Corbyn, aren't you?
Stupid woman.
And Alec, you're a drone man yourself, are you?
No, not at all. Not at all. I've got a CSE grade 1 in electronics.
Okay, so that's your area of expertise. Anyway. Thank you very much, Alec. Very helpful. If you've got a point of view on the drones or on anything else we're discussing, 0344 499 1000, that if you're a first-time caller, a woman caller, a caller who disagrees with me, your call is prioritised. Faye says on the Twitter, we should be... Oh, no, that's for Dan Wooten. I'm not prepared to read out Dan Wooten's tweets. A question for Tamer. Is it impractical to scramble a helicopter with a large net to capture a drone?
Well, if you don't know where the drone is, and remember, drones move super quickly. And like I said,
how quickly do they move?
They can move. I mean, mine can go out. I think we've got a top speed of about 40 miles an hour out of it. So if you can't see it and the drone's gone one way and the helicopter's gone the other, it's pretty impossible. Now, what you can do, France has done quite well, and you mentioned it in your intro. Actually, you've got birds of prey that actually hunt down drones.
Eagles,
eagles, which are fantastic.
Turns out the French eagle is more majestic than the British.
Really? Is it because it's...
Apparently, they did try.
Wait till Frexit.
They tried. They tried British eagles, but they weren't quite up to the job. Chris says, the ineptitude of politicians now astounds me. If they spent less time concentrating on PC issues and more time concentrating on important issues, then this country would be in a far better place. That is a point, isn't it, Tamer, that the British government, perhaps for the reason that they had no answer, was very slow to come forward and take responsibility.
For what? For the drone situation? Yeah. The problem is, George, is like I said, I don't think really, we're very unlucky because it's happened here, but I think the same thing would have happened anywhere else in the world, or anybody else that had the same kind of restrictions.
Well, presumably will now, given the copycatting nature.
Yeah, and remember, the aerospace industry is very, 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 very quick to make amends and changes to make passenger safety huge. Black boxes, if there's an air crash investigation, politics doesn't enter this. So actually, I think we should not really pay attention to the politicians, just focus on the problem at hand and find a solution to it.
Marie McFarlane, my old friend, says, very disturbing fact shared by Tamer, read drones. My 7-year-old niece got a drone for her Christmas last year. I don't approve. And it is on Santa lists throughout the UK. I despair at the lack of power of military services to intercept. Well, all the military services are on
just a very quick point on that.
Front. Yeah, go on.
Just a very, very quick point on that. A lot of the commercial drones that you get will not be able to kind of deal with wind or light wind. A lot of them will be for indoor use. So don't worry too much if it's a light drone or a small drone. It's kind of the drones that are in the 1,000 and up price range that you're looking that could be quite a lot more disruptive. The smaller drones, nothing really to worry about.
X-Ray Vision says a lot of people are saying DroneGate is a false flag distraction because somebody's government is bang in trouble there. I told you.
Yeah, potentially, but we can't verify that.
Lee McGregor in Belfast says, why don't they use eagles to take these down like people have been training them for?
Yeah, well, we've spoken about this. Again, It depends on the size of the drone. I mean, if you've got a big drone, remember those things are lethal. Those propellers are lethal. They're carrying up to 20 kilograms in weight and flying them through the sky.
So they might chop the eagle up.
So they'll chop the eagle up. So there are only certain drones that eagles can get.
Tamer, thank you very much indeed for that. A man of many parts, including being a drone pilot, for reasons which you have explained. Let's hope everybody believes them. 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You call us, we'll call you back. And it won't cost you, therefore, more than a penny or two. The first hour has, if you'll forgive the pun, flown by. There's 2 more hours to come. Now, Donald Trump has, of course, often opined about the war records of others, most particularly a man no longer with us, Senator John McCain, who heroically bombed the poor people of Vietnam over and over and over again until he was shot down. Then the Vietnamese people he'd been bombing saved his life, and he's known as a war hero, therefore. Donald Trump publicly questioned that. Indeed, he questioned whether someone who allowed himself to become a prisoner of war could possibly be a war hero. Controversial stuff indeed, especially if you were a draft dodger. Now, he's not the only draft dodger, of course. George W. Bush pretended to be in the Texas National Guard as a pilot. Helicopter pilot, I think. I say pretended because the record showed that he didn't show up for his work very often. Bill Clinton dodged the draft by becoming a scholar at Oxford University. Donald Trump is no scholar. He's no officer. He's no gentleman. But he does have really, really, really bad ankles. That's why 7 times he had his service in Vietnam deferred. It hasn't stopped him being something of an armchair general, though, and the generals are today up in arms against him. In fact, he better wish and hope that they're not literally up in arms because, hey, a military coup is the logical conclusion of some of the things that are being said on the Potomac right now about his decision to withdraw American forces from both Syria and Afghanistan. We'll be talking shortly to a man with a military record, a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, about all of that. Lots of tweets coming in. Adam Gary, my fellow history boy, he and I do a double act, the History Boys. Adam says, why is it that when it comes to bombing Syrians, Iraqis, Libyans, Afghans and Serbs, cost is not an issue, but when it comes time to attacking a drone that has closed a major airport due to a potential safety risk, everyone is counting pennies. Very good point. The Communicipalist says if you can see a drone, why can't you use an air rifle to down it with no risk to the public? The police discharged firearms in built-up areas, so I don't know why they were so worried about shooting up in the sky on a massive airfield. I don't get that. Well, I suppose because there are planes taking off and landing, although they haven't been doing much of that of late. You're right. Filza says, thanks, GG, for asking Tamer the questions that were popping up in a layman's mind. And Tamer talks so well. Very informative. And the Red Resistance says, what's most frustrating about all this stupid woman faux outrage is the media being prepared to spend hours and days on this claptrap, but not quite so interested in the £85 million of cuts in public health spending put through under the radar today. Let's hear from Matt on drones. Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, George.
Hi, mate.
I just wanted to raise a few points that no one had covered yet.
Okay.
Because the criminal aspect of drones. Because when they first, a few years ago, when they first started using them to drop parcels off to prisons, we see there was they had to stop it. There was no way it could keep going on.
Yeah, well, my friends in the Prison Officers Association have spoken on here several times about drugs and other contraband, weapons even, being delivered to prisoners via drones.
Yeah, they have, and they've also been used as eyes in the sky lookouts for thieves, especially in the countryside where, the police take a while to respond. I won't go into detail, obviously, but...
why are we allowing these things then, Matt? Seems to me there's a case for a complete ban on these things.
Well, George, I hate to stamp on anyone's fun, but I've got no clue how to solve the problem at all because it seems like a ban is the only way forward.
This could happen every weekend now in one airport after another.
Well, I think this is going to be the hair that broke the camel's back, this one. But they were also using them in the French protests to keep their eye on the police movements when they were blocking the roundabouts in the countryside. That wasn't really covered on mainstream media. And if the police have lost air superiority over the public, they're going to ban them. It's the only way, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, if a state is not a state unless it is in control of its airspace and its borders, is it?
Well, no, exactly. The number one rule is the air superiority, and well, we British, we know that.
Well, it turns out that the might of the Royal Air Force, our Trident nuclear weapons, the armed forces, the police, the transport police, all the things that we spend many billions of pounds on, can protect us from a drone.
Exactly, and I mean, if that had a knock-on effect...
Who knew? Thank God that the criminals and the terrorists didn't know. I mean, you could theoretically, therefore, land an exploding drone somewhere.
Well, we've seen them used a few months ago in an attempted assassination.
In Venezuela, yes.
In Venezuela, yeah. Whether that was a serious attempt, I don't know. But it just goes to show you that, especially the miniaturization of the electronics that's going on at the moment, it's frightening.
It is, yeah. I'm newly converted to the idea that it's frightening, but I'm aghast. I'm open-mouthed at just how vulnerable the state has turned out to be, how optionless, how feeble they've turned out to be. No wonder the government wasn't coming forward to speak, because what is there to say? We're sitting ducks.
Exactly. There's 1,000,001 criminal uses. Anyway, I just wanted to bring up them few points, George.
No, you've done well. You've done well. An excellent call, Matt. Thanks for that. Here's Lulzin on the same subject. Lulzin, if I've pronounced your name correctly, I hope.
Hi, George. Good evening.
Good evening.
I just want to say that I don't believe this drone attack is all as the media are interpreting it. I mean, do these things not run out of batteries? How on earth can a drone fly for what?
Well, Tamer's no doubt about to advise me about that.
And also, I remember watching this video, which is 20-year-old, a demonstration of a Lockheed Martin, this tiny 1-foot-long drone-like weapon that was built to shoot down nuclear warheads. I mean, how on earth one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, this country, Britain, they can't trace a drone in the daytime?
Well, that's right. They can drop a bomb on somebody on a bicycle in Afghanistan, they say.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Not control our airspace above our airports.
I really hope there isn't a false flag terrorist attack, George, but I wouldn't be surprised. We all watched 18 years ago the planes that flew into the World Trade Centers, and all of us thought that the U.S. government and other powers that be had nothing to do with it. I don't think any conscious person now believes that the 9/11 is as the government told us it was.
Well, I'm one who disagrees with you. There may be others. It's a bit of a diversion, nonetheless, Lulzan. Thanks for your call. David Leviscont says, unfortunately, across the world, governments have become nothing more than people farms to provide an endless supply of slaves to corporations. Our own police swore an oath to protect common law, yet find themselves protecting corporate law. I am not a Russian bot, adds David. John says, according to lip-reading experts, May says austerity is over, so no poverty and deaths on the streets, and spending hundreds of billions on nuclear weapons while unable to protect UK airspace from drones. Stella McFarlane says, we may not like her, but it's obvious she is not stupid. Might be obvious to you, Stella, ain't to me. P. Doff says, what a great week for May. Corbyn and the Gatwick fiasco to keep the press occupied, instead of reporting on the rise of deaths of the homeless. I don't think she's a stupid woman. I think she's cold, evil and calculating. Tony X says in Rojava, the unpalatable YPG, YPJ and US coalition was not just to fight IS associates. The Turkish army are active allies of these filthy animals, so you'll excuse me for feeling sadness in my heart, anti-war as I am, to hear the US are leaving. And Charlie says, Charlie Faye Culross. Free speech, you say. So why, after the call back... Sorry, I fell asleep there, Charlie. Call back from your team last week and then waiting 5 minutes to freely speak to you, you and your team decided to not give me this free speech you speak of. Be honest now, gorgeous. Maybe people got as bored, Charlie, as I am reading this. I'm going to deal with the point that you make after this. Now, let me make a statement. A sort of ex cathedra pronunciamento. It's been sparked, if you like, by Charlie Faye, F-A-E, Culross. First of all, I don't pick the callers. Neither do I pick the written material that comes in, tweets, emails, texts. There are 4 people behind the glass doing that for me. So I have no idea if you have called, if we've called you back, how long you've been waiting, or what you intend to talk about until it appears on my screen. Secondly, far from being afraid of Charlie Faye Culross, we prioritize opposition voices. So you've got a better chance, not a lesser chance, a better chance of getting on the show if you disagree with me. So any implication that anybody has been discriminated against because I might be afraid of them, I who took on the United States Senate in real term, that I might be afraid of them, frankly, you're flattering yourself. Thirdly, we have a gigantic number of callers, more than we have ever had, more than we could get through in 2, maybe 3 shows. So if you call, you may not get through. That's why one of the reasons why you should get your call in early, because too many people leave their calls till later in the show. The earlier you've got your number logged with us, the more likely you are to be called back. Fourthly, I'm not being censored. Tamer is not my censor. He's not my handler, my controller. He's just an innocent drone pilot who happens to be working behind the glass. I'm censoring myself. I'm censoring myself because, notwithstanding the absolute stalwart support of talkRADIO, its management, its owners, I am under attack. This show is under attack. And surely, if you think about it for a minute, you've already concluded that. You've already wised up on that. Now, I have many platforms. I'm very privileged. I have television platforms for now. I have radio platforms for now. I have Patreon. I have Facebook. I have Twitter. Who knows where I'll end up? What platforms I'll be on or be forced on. And I can choose to speak about some things on some platforms, but not on others, just for reasons of common sense, not to have the show shut down. Do you get my drift? It's kind of obvious. You don't need to be Einstein. It's not rocket science. So if you don't hear me speaking about a subject, it's not because I'm afraid to speak about it. It's because I have concluded that in the circumstances I and we are in, under attack, it's wiser not to. As I say, I think I'm entitled to ask for people's understanding on that. So, Charlie, nah, afraid of you, I'm not. Dr. John Nagl from Pennsylvania, USA, is the headmaster of the prestigious Haverford School. Formerly, he was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. He's retired from that now, but he is a former president of the Center for a New American Security, as well as being the current headmaster. He's an expert in counterinsurgency and has published 2 books on military strategy. So the very least we can conclude is that Dr. John knows a bit more about soldiering than his commander-in-chief. Am I right, Dr. John?
I certainly have more experience soldiering than President Trump does. That is certainly true, George.
That's a very loyal answer and a diplomatic one, fitting from the headmaster of Haverford School. But I must press you on that point. It is passing strange, isn't it, that someone who had such bad ankles, but who can play golf so prodigiously, is ready to question the war record, the military tactics of people who actually are soldiers and were soldiers.
They were bone spurs, actually, I believe, rather than ankles, was what gave then Donald Trump deferments from the draft in Vietnam. It is not necessary to have served as a soldier to be a good military strategist, but it doesn't hurt. Certainly the president's repudiation of military advice, in particular on the recent decisions on withdrawing all American troops from Syria and on cutting American troops in Afghanistan in half, I think those decisions would certainly have benefited from the advice of his Secretary of Defense, now resigned, Jim Mattis, a man I served with in Iraq and know pretty well.
Although it does have the benefit of being what he promised he would do when elected as president. So he has a mandate for it, doesn't he?
Well, that's an interesting question. So people promise many things to get elected and then discover once they're in office that things aren't quite that simple. And certainly the consequences of a withdrawal of American troops from Syria, just to talk about that one, they will embolden Russia. That decision was applauded by Putin, by President Putin of Russia. They put at risk Israel's security. They give succor and courage to ISIS, the Islamic State, and to al-Qaeda more broadly. They damage our ally in Jordan. They upset the Western alliance. They give strength to President al-Assad of Syria, so that while the president may have campaigned on this particular role, I think it's safe to say that not very many people took him seriously, and certainly no one would have expected him to make the decision without consultation with our allies, without consultation with his own Secretary of Defense.
Well, these are highly politicized points, so I'm glad we've tempted you onto the political terrain that you were reluctant to enter in the beginning of this conversation. That seems rather a lot of claims for a couple of thousand American soldiers in the north of Syria, doesn't it? Israel's security, Jordan's security, ISIS. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is threatened by the withdrawal of 2,000 American soldiers. What are they, supermen?
They are mighty men, George. They are Americans, for God's sake. But because they are Americans, being serious, they come with an awful lot behind them. So they come with a lot of intelligence assets. They come with air power behind them. They come with artillery, and they bring, most of all, the commitment of the United States to continue the fight against ISIS, to support the Kurds, who are the primary fighters on the ground. And so those American fighters have a multiplier effect far beyond their numbers. And that's why withdrawing them is such a bad idea, because while those soldiers are, of course, loved by their families, they are all volunteers, they all signed up for this, and they know that they are having a real impact in pushing ISIS back. ISIS is not defeated, as the president claimed earlier this week, but ISIS is on the ropes. Our previous president, Barack Obama, made a mistake of withdrawing American troops from Iraq prematurely, and ISIS returned there. We then had to send American troops back. If President Trump does, in fact, follow through on his threat to withdraw American troops from Syria now, I do believe that we will have to send more troops back in the future. More American troops will be put at risk. It will cost us more dollars, and lots of our allies will be killed in the interim, and ISIS will grow stronger. So this is a mistake far beyond just bringing 2,000 American troops home.
Well, these are, of course, political decisions because we live in democracies and we elect governments, and in your case, presidents, to make geostrategic, geopolitical decisions. It would appear that President Trump has listened rather to the president of his NATO ally, Turkey, rather than, well, you.
It is certainly true that President Trump is not listening to me on this subject. And Turkey is our NATO ally, but that does not mean that our interests align in every country or all the time with those of Turkey. And in particular, Turkey is more concerned about the fact that we are allied with the Kurds in Syria, I believe, than Turkey is concerned about the defeat of ISIS. And so you are correct. And all that said, even President Erdogan did not want America to withdraw all American troops from Syria as rapidly as the president has now promised to do.
So what's going to happen now that the new liberal icon, Mad Dog Mattis, has become on the Potomac this heroic figure in the minds of some unlikely people like Bette Midler and Mia Farrow? What's going to happen now? He obviously resigned to damage Trump further, and the statements he's made are damaging. Will the president hold firm, do you think, or will he buckle under pressure?
That's going to be very interesting to see. He has a history of buckling under pressure. He's currently, as you may know, Washington is transfixed right now with the possibility that we're going to shut down about a quarter of the U.S. government over the president's border wall. It is not clear yet whether the president will hold firm on that. I think that the president has faced real opposition from within his own party. Senator Lindsey Graham, a significant voice on defense policy, very, very upset at the president about this issue. I will be surprised if the president does, in fact, carry through on withdrawing all American troops from Syria. I believe that the Pentagon will slow roll him on this. I disagree with your assessment of Mattis's motives. I think that Mattis believed that his loyalty to our allies and to the very principle of alliances and his argument that America is stronger when it acts with its allies, and in particular his belief that the Kurds who have fought with us so bravely and so long against ISIS in Syria would be so severely damaged by this decision is what drove General Mattis's decision to resign at this particular point in time.
And yet the U.S. doesn't ever seem so concerned about the plight of Kurdish people in Turkey, where they're routinely and regularly massacred by your NATO ally.
I think that there's some truth to that. I think that we have made an alliance with the Kurds, with the Kurdish forces inside Syria, which we have not done with the Kurdish people inside Turkey. And anyone who expects consistency in foreign policy is asking more than they are likely to get. But certainly, I think General Mattis's claim that America is stronger when it acts with its allies, and that if it ever does choose to abandon its allies, which people on your little island can argue we've done in the past. That we do so, when we do so thoughtfully and after due deliberation and serious conversations. And so this is a process foul, I think, believed to be a process foul, even by those who agree with the policy decisions that the president is advocating here, the withdrawal of American troops from Syria.
Well, ask not for whom that bell was tolling, Dr. John, because it tolls. It tolls for all of us. I'm deeply grateful to you. Thank you for your time. Dr. John Nagl, the headmaster of the Haverford School and a former lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. As he more or less confirmed, the military-industrial complex is up in arms about President Trump following through on his election pledges. Soldiers apparently find that a difficult concept to follow. Tell me what you think. 0344 499 1000. You can email me through the website at talkradio.co.uk. You can text me, text the word talk, followed by your message to 87222, though that will cost you 25 pence plus normal charges. You can tweet me at George Galloway at Talk Radio. Here's an SMS from Big Al. George, you say it's illegal for the USA troops to be in Syria fighting ISIS. Well, it's also illegal to bomb and kill the USA and UK people. When they come to us, we go to them, wherever they are. Oh dear, Al. Oh dear, how dangerous a little knowledge can be. Scottish Panda says, a good day to bury news. And Lee Williams says, if Obama would have pulled the US troops out of Afghanistan and Syria, would the liberal class not be singing his praises? I think they would. I think you're right, Lee. It's a bit of a national obsession, international actually, that in fact nothing Trump says or does can ever be right, even if he's only saying today is Friday. Here's Donald in Inverness. Now, the funny thing is, Donald, I was listening on Radio 2 on my way in here, and to my absolute astonishment, Simon Mayo played, and I haven't heard it in decades, Donald, Where's Your Trousers? And now there's a Donald in Inverness on the line. You're particularly welcome, sir.
Thanks very much. Yeah, when I was a kiddie, I was much embarrassed by that song.
It's a very good song, though, especially when he goes into Elvis mode. I don't know.
I haven't heard it for a long time. Maybe you could get someone to play it.
I will. I'll ask my friends to play it. It's very nice, Andy Stewart. It was good to hear it again. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk about Jeremy Corbyn's lip-reading brouhaha.
Ah, yes.
But first of all, I want to congratulate you and say how pleased I am that you've got your funding for killing Kelly.
Thank you. Yes, it's already underway now.
Yeah, looking at the speed it was going up, I was expecting that's good. Although I'm not sure exactly how if the money gets collected automatically or if I've got to do something more.
No, Donald, no. It will be collected on Boxing Day by Kickstarter. They take a cut off it, and then the rest is passed to us. But we've already begun work. We've got a top-class director, and I don't want to give the name away today, of the musical director, who is a very, very eminent person indeed.
I look forward to that. Coming back, I don't know what your take is, George, on this Jeremy Corbyn thing, but I mean, I've looked at it and tried to be dispassionate, and I'm firmly of the opinion that he says stupid people. I know that many lip readers have said the opposite, but I don't think it's right. But my angle's a bit more than that. You need to look at more than his lips. And what I say is, I've done a blog post on this actually, which I've called Watch My Lips, but How About My Eyes? If you look at, Theresa May said to him to tell him to look at the people that were behind him. And of course he doesn't do that, but what he does do is he looks along the front bench, the opposition front bench from left to right.
Yes. And so there's a collective implied.
Yeah, and if he was to have said stupid woman, you would expect him to be looking at her. Instead, he looks along the front bench, and to me, he says stupid people. Now, I haven't seen anyone comment on his eyes, and so that's why I'm just putting it out for.
Well, it's a very legitimate point. As you know, I always am honest, and so I must honestly tell you that I thought he'd said stupid woman.
Yeah.
And I see absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's not even unparliamentary. As you know, there's a big, long list of words that you're not allowed to say in Parliament. But to call someone a stupid man or a stupid woman is not unparliamentary at all. Indeed, Hammond, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, said it about one of his own MPs not that long ago. So I thought he said stupid woman. I haven't looked at the lip reading and even in your case eye casting evidence, because I don't really care enough about it. And that's my overarching point, that the idea that the entire media industry in Britain went into days of overdrive over what somebody may or may not have said under their breath, i.e. officially did not say at all, according to the parliamentary record, Hansard, is too absurd for words.
I agree with you entirely on that, and that's why I held off. I wasn't going to do a blog on it. But when nobody was mentioning this side of things, I thought, well, I better put it out.
No, it's
there.
a very, very legitimate point. As I said at the beginning of the show, Jeremy Corbyn is not a liar, and he's 100 times more politically correct than me, and 1,000 times more politically correct than almost everybody else in the country. So it's very unlikely that he would choose those words, and if he tells you he didn't choose them, you really should believe him.
Exactly, and that's what the Speaker told them, but it didn't stop them.
No.
But you're correct, and of course the other thing that they mentioned was that there was a homeless man died outside the House of Commons.
As they were fulminating, yes.
Yeah. There's another thought that I put in my blog post, George, that it was a timely reminder of reading my lips. Because I've tried to find it on the net, but I can't get the exact words. But Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, said at the 2010 Conservative Party conference, and what she did say is this, she said, listen very carefully, I will say this just once, that the immigration numbers will be brought down to the tens of thousands by the end of Parliament. And, of course, she failed to do that, which is part of the Brexit thing.
Yeah, I suppose the lesson, Donald, is you shouldn't make statements like that. As you remember, the late George H.W. Bush, Bush the First, he made that phrase famous. Read my lips, we will not raise taxes, he said,
quite right.
Just immediately prior to raising taxes.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what your views are on Jordan Peterson, but Jordan Peterson's saying individuals have got to start taking control of themselves, and one of the first things they should do is start speaking the truth. And if they speak to the truth, they don't need to remember all the lies that they've told.
Well, that's always been my rubric. I don't know about him. I hear mixed reports about him, but I haven't read any of his stuff. But he's right, at least on that. If you're not telling lies, you don't have to have a good memory, because the truth is the truth. Donald, thank you very much. We'll see if we can get Donald Where's Your Trousers up, at least in part. Let's take a break for some capitalist messages. Here's David in Nottingham. Go ahead, David.
Hi, George, how are you?
I'm well. Nice of you to call. Go ahead.
I've seen you at the Savoy.
Where? Oh, at the Savoy in Nottingham.
Yeah, I was there.
I had a double take there because I thought you meant that posh hotel in London. I was just about to deny it. Go ahead.
Right, George, what I'd like to mention is are people aware of the Magna Carta, Article 61? When you feel you're being...
I'm aware of the Magna Carta. I've seen it, but I'm not well up on Article 61. Tell me.
It was updated in 2001. It was to protect people. If you feel you're being unfairly governed, then you can send a letter of pledge to the 25 barons, which I think was published in the Daily Telegraph, and you can opt out of all the acts of law and just live by common law. And after you've done that, you're sworn to the crown to create as much chaos as possible to stop being governed from corrupt governments.
Is this a wind-up, David?
No, it is not a wind-up. Have a look yourself, George.
All right, well, I can see through the glass that Tamer is already doing that, but someone who sat in Parliament for nearly 30 years, I wasn't aware that there was a parallel legal structure.
It's a really old law, George, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and it's still valid, do you think?
It is still valid, and you also have to take a letter to someone who's to do with the crown, like the police police chief.
You don't have to get dressed up in chainmail and armour and get on a horse with a lance.
No, and you have to tell them you're not happy with being policed by them because it's by consent, and you have to allow them, the Queen, 40 days to correct it. Otherwise, you can be a legal rebellion.
Well, that is very interesting, David. Until we've confirmed that, I urge all of our listeners not to go out on illegal rebellion. Thank you very much indeed, David in Nottingham. Art Bennett says, wouldn't this be a great false flag for someone who might like a justification for banning drones? What, like me, you mean? I can think of no good purpose, none that outweighs the evil that the drone appears to now being used in delivering drugs and weapons to prisons and all kinds of criminal activities, and now the chaos at our airports, which, if you think about it, if we're as vulnerable as Tamer says we are, and as events seem to show that we are, then there's nothing to stop this happening every day at every airport, in which case we'll go burst. Here's a text from someone that's unknown, I'm afraid. George, if anyone had called me a stupid man and believed it, believe me, it's happened a lot. I'd just come up with a clever quip in return, and that would be the end of it. For every stupid woman, there is a stupid man. These snowflake people need gritting now before we lose our spine. Actually, I've met far more stupid men than I have stupid women. Here's Tony in Goole, East Yorkshire. Tony, go ahead, sir.
Are you, George? First of all, is the line clear? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you well, thanks.
Good. George, I rang up 2 years ago, just after the vote went through, and with the greatest respect, obviously you, from being a left-wing point of view, was a staunch leaver, and I was a...
Oh, Tony, we've lost that line. We'll get back to you, Tony. Don't worry about it. Graham from Fort William says, you must be in the Christmas spirit. I haven't heard you tonight bad-mouth Donald Trump. It's actually coming across that you maybe like him and agree with his policies. Maybe you're realising that he's doing a good job. No, even a stopped clock is right twice a day, Graham. Fra says, the Kurds have been abandoned by their imperialist masters. When you lay down with dogs, you get fleas. And David says Trump is doing something that other presidents have never done, i.e. keep his word. That's unheard of, though, out of the world. Damien says, and this is a government that says it has the technology to deal with a border in Ireland. What a very good point, Damien. What a very, very good point. Fra again says drone technology is terrorism on the cheap. Why have elaborate plots to assassinate politicians? Just fly drones into planes. Puts all security measure efforts at airports obsolete. My guess is it's a disgruntled ex-worker exacting revenge, maybe. Chris Morningstar says the only solution is to have these commercially available drones causing these mass problems banned, or at least only available only under strict licence. What's the purpose of them, if not for nefarious reasons? Here's Paul in Manchester. Go ahead, Paul.
Good evening, sir.
Always a pleasure to hear you. Go ahead.
You stupid boy. Yeah, I'm just thinking it's ridiculous, you know. I mean, he says he didn't call her a stupid woman.
Well, I think you've got to believe him. I thought he did say that, and I entirely would have agreed with it, but he says he didn't, and you've got to believe him. He's not a liar. I've never known him to tell a lie in almost 40 years. And moreover, he's so achingly politically correct. He wouldn't say anything that would offend anybody. That's why he got to be the leader of the Labour Party, because nobody hated him.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, I mean, she is stupid, and by virtue of the fact she's a woman, that makes her a stupid woman.
Yeah, but you know, that's true, Paul. That is true. I mean, in terms of the exact words, but there is a class of sexist, misogynist that actually means by those words you're stupid because you're a woman. But I can tell you, I cannot imagine any man on these islands who would be less likely to mean that than Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, or it could be put in the context that like all women, you're stupid. But I mean, she's stupid, and because she's a woman.
Well, what a mess we're in. It's hard to resist the allegation of stupidity. In any case, it isn't even unparliamentary. Like, you're not allowed to say somebody's drunk. And I coined several euphemisms for that. I used to say that the minister appears to have lunched rather well, or the minister's better before lunch, or the minister's swaying in the non-existent breeze. All of that, there are certain words that are forbidden. But calling someone a stupid man or a stupid woman is not unparliamentary.
It's certainly not. But I mean, it's ridiculous, and the press, the way they've gone into fever pitch. Is this? And
well, I think our media's heading for a big shock. The more atrociously they behave, the less people are paying any attention to them. It's in my life, if I get a call, as I did this week, from a mainstream journalist, I don't even bother returning the call. I really don't. I couldn't care less what they write. And not least because I know that fewer and fewer people care less what they write. I'm really not interested in them. I've got my own media. I've got my own means of communication with people. People, if they want to know what I think, can listen to me in real time. They don't have to have it pass through the poisoned bladders of journalists. And I think the last couple of days has scunnered, to use a Scottish term, scunnered a lot of people, sickened people. It's actually made them sickened that in this sea of troubles that we have, that they wasted the last hours of a parliamentary session before breaking for a 17-day holiday, Paul. All those trees had to die for all that coverage about a statement made under the breath by Jeremy Corbyn.
And there's people clamouring to food banks, and it's ridiculous. And 0 hours contracts and uncertainty of what's going to be the country's going to be like in the future. It's ridiculous what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to wish you a happy Christmas and your colleagues.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it very much. And good health, better health in the next year. Thanks for that. Tony is back on the line from Goole. Tony, sorry about that, my friend.
No, it's my fault. I didn't put enough 50 pences in the meter.
Okay.
Time to add under authority. Right, I'll make it quick, George. It's just a quick point. Going back over the last 2 years, right, I'm going to make this quick because I must be thick. When this vote gets took in the next 2 weeks, when they come back to the Commons, and the vote will probably get failed, why can't
it looks that way, although unless she knows something we don't know.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask you as an uneducated man, because businesses up and down the country are getting stressed. People can't move on with the businesses, and life can't move on. What's to stop Theresa May if this vote gets blocked? What's to stop her going back to Brussels and saying, do you know what? I've had enough of this with Brussels. I can't get it passed in Parliament. I'm sick of Brussels dictating to us. We are going to call the shots. I'm making a decision. We are going out with no deal. What's to stop her doing that and having
nothing? There's not. In fact, not only is there nothing
back from the country.
Not only is there nothing stopping her doing that. That is what will happen. That is the default position.
But wouldn't she be better, whether people agree with her or don't agree with her? Wouldn't she get a bit of, I don't know, begrudging respect from people for taking it by the balls, if I can say, and just saying, look, I've had enough of this now from all sides, including the Conservatives, including Labour, DUP, SNP, whatever, and just say, look, we've had enough. We're not going to be dictated by Brussels any longer. I mean, I'm a Remainer, and even I'm getting fed up of Brussels dictating to our country what they can do. And this is somebody who was against your beliefs. And I'm just saying...
Well, I think it's admirable. It's admirable what you're saying, and it's exactly what I believe she should say. But I'd be lying if I said it's what I think she will say, because she doesn't actually want to leave the European Union in the first place. She wants to leave some parts of the European Union while remaining in salient parts of the European Union in a way that makes it Brexit in name only. The problem is she can't get that through Parliament. That's her problem, Tony. So she can't get what she wants through Parliament, and if she gets what she doesn't want, which is the default position, she'll end up out on World Trade Organization terms for which she's made no preparation.
George, can I just say
we can't even, Tony, we can't even shoot down a drone over Gatwick Airport.
No, but George, there comes a time in life where sometimes you have to do things you don't agree with for decency and democracy. I am a staunch Remainer, and even I think it's time now that we leave, because I am sick to death of hearing other Remainers saying, let's have a second vote. If we're not going to have democracy in this country, I have to stand by a decision that we lost. That is democracy. If we can't stand by democracy, then Parliament should fail.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it's a brilliant case that you're making, and I commend you for making it. The only thing that the Remainers can do is form themselves into a political party committed to rejoining the European Union. That's a perfectly legitimate political platform, to rejoin the European Union. Now, that party already exists in the form of the Liberal Democrats. They can be joined by Tories and Labour people who feel the same way. That's perfectly legitimate. But you cannot nullify a decision that's already been made before it's even been implemented. Tony, thanks for the call in Goole. Chris says, I've done that one. That was on the drones. Let me squeeze one in. It'll have to be a short one. X-ray vision. We want to spend hundreds of millions on Trident, and then we get taken out with a toy. This is ridiculous. Dronegate. What a very, very powerful tweet from X-ray vision. Well, the second hour's flown by, but there's one more to go. Stay tuned. Big salute to Roger Waters, Pink Floyd, for one of the great tracks of all time. Another break in the wall. Because, of course, we're talking about Donald Trump's wall in this third hour. An army vet, as I recall, I've not got the details in front of me, but a man who lost both arms and one leg in the army has begun a GoFundMe project to pay for Donald Trump's wall, which is 1,954 miles long. I know that because 1954 is the year that I was born. 1,954 miles is a lot of wall. That'll take a lot of GoFunding, that's for sure. But such an iconic issue, such a divisive issue has this become that there are all kinds of people now actually setting up GoFundMe pages for ladders to help the refugees and migrants climb over the wall, and one even wants to build an escalator just to get the migrants in quicker, if you get my drift. I'm not sure that any of those things will happen, or even if the wall will happen. Trump seems to be less committed to it than he was before. My view is he can put a wall round the United States. In fact, I'd quite like a big wall around the United States so they couldn't get out. Evening, George. Dr. John Nagl repeatedly claimed that Trump's plan for withdrawal from Syria will strengthen ISIS. However, as revealed by Robert Fisk of The Guardian, amongst others, ISIS were armed with US weapons and vehicles, ostensibly via the proxy of their mutual allies in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. US policy in Syria has been the stuff of Alice in Wonderland, and US withdrawal from the area is a necessary first step towards the stabilization of the country. Of course, the arms manufacturers and their stooges in the US media will inevitably abhor such a move. Well, I agree entirely in every particular with that, Samson. I didn't want to be rude to our guest, the Lieutenant Colonel, and indeed the people working with me tonight were rather worried that I was going to get rude, because I could have. The disparaging reference to our little islands got me very angry indeed, but not as angry as at the sheer delusion, self-delusion, in which Americans, and in particular the war industry in America, has convinced itself that it is the world's policeman, that it is the world's peacekeeper, that problems in the world are solved by the presence of American forces rather than the opposite. I really, really could go on. But I've got another American guest on the line. He's Luke O'Neill. He's a Boston-based journalist. He writes a newsletter, great title, called Welcome to Hell World. Now, he is crowdfunding for a means by which those turning up at the border can get over Donald Trump's wall, which, of course, presupposes that there is going to be a wall. And Luke has gone one better than ladders. He wants to fund escalators. Well, Luke, that is the most ambitious project I think I've ever heard. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. And it's definitely going to happen. It's a very real project, and we're going to build thousands of escalators. Just you wait.
But the state will stop you doing that, won't it?
No, of course it's a joke. It's meant to send up the ridiculousness of this crowdfunding for the wall in the first place.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, Luke. And good joke, by the way. I didn't mean to be disparaging about it. The wall, 1,954 miles long, was an election pledge by Trump. He got elected, so he's got a right to build it, doesn't he?
I can't really agree with you there. It has been something that he's, banged on and on about it since even before he was elected. But I think, like with a lot of things that Trump says, we all just sort of, let him say it and let him imagine that it's
say
actually
something else tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. And he's sort of flailing around about the wall. He's been somewhat weakened, after our midterm elections here. And he really hasn't given much to his supporters. And in this wall, I think he's sort of grasped onto it as the this thing that he can't let go of, because he's got to deliver something, and he's getting a little desperate here. And the wall is sort of a symbolic. Basically what it is a useless symbolic monument to his racism, which is really what his campaign has all been about.
He did start off by saying that Mexico would pay for it. That didn't last long, and Mexico now has a president who's probably the least likely man in the world to fund it.
Right.
How is it going, his negotiations in Congress to get them to pony up the money?
Well, we're watching sort of at the last minute here today. They're trying to get a last minute bill to fund the government to carry over for the next couple of months. And one of the things Trump is saying is he won't sign anything to fund the government that doesn't include $5 billion for the wall. And while that's passed through the House, it looks like it's not going to pass through the Senate here. So it looks like we're headed for a government shutdown. The last I checked, about a half hour ago.
Okay. Now, tell us about the fundraising effort to build the wall for Donald Trump. Are there really enough gullible members of the public that would pay their own money to build a wall 1,954 miles long?
I think the first thing you have to understand here about America is that we're a deeply, deeply stupid country filled with gullible people who are, on top of that, very, very racist. And, I thought before I came on, I thought I was going to be the one saying negative things about America, but I caught your intro there, and it seems like you're on the same side with me there.
Well, so. I had the pleasure, if it was, of interviewing a lieutenant colonel from the United States Army just prior to you. So forgive me, the blood was coursing rather hotly through my veins.
Well, I'm no big fan of the American military empire project either, so we're on the same page there. Mm-hmm. But anyways, there's been thousands of people. Last I checked, it was up to almost $13 million who have donated.
Been pledged.
Right, and
pledged or actually donated. How does GoFundMe work? Have they actually parted from $13 million?
Yes, once you put in your credit card or whatever, and it's basically like you donate to any other charity. I'm sure there's a way you could pull it back if you want, but essentially these people there's $12,902,000 right now as I look.
My God. And we're in the wrong business, Luke.
And I know, and the thing is that it's absurd for so many reasons. First of all, the wall, such a wall, as you keep mentioning how long it is, it would cost at least $20 billion is what they've estimated. And while this $12 million looks like a big number, it's really absolutely nothing.
Even Trump's $5 billion is nothing. It's just a statement of intent, really.
Right. It's just Trump looking for a win, something that he really likes large numbers, as you may have noticed. He just wants to go around and be able to say $5 billion. But these people, and on top of that, this isn't a legal way to give money to the government. So the guy behind this thing, he's a veteran, and I'm sure he, had a distinguished service or whatever. But he's also been behind at least two popular Facebook groups that have been shut down for running these sort of garbage, Hillary Clinton is the Antichrist type of posts. So this guy doesn't really have the best track record in terms of being trustworthy with media stuff.
Well, he's got $12,900,000 in his pocket right now. Nice work if you can get it.
Sure is.
Just while I've got you on, one of the most incredible things, and I've had many incredible things happen to me in my life, is to see all these liberal Hollywood glitterati one-time peaceniks denouncing Trump for pulling American soldiers out of illegal occupation of other people's countries. Why have liberals in the United States allowed their hatred of Trump, entirely justified, to morph into falling in love with somebody called General Mad Dog Mattis and the FBI and the military-industrial complex? This is the most perverse pantomime horse on the planet.
Well, that split that you're talking about there, that goes right back to the 2016 here for us. We're sort of the Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton wings of the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, there's no real robust left in American politics. And the Democrats are more like I think there'd be more of a centrist right party in the UK.
Yeah.
And so, in America is very, very much has this, cultural brain damage about militarism. And even if you're on the left, you're not supposed to say anything bad about the troops. So that's where that comes from. We're supposed to consider all war efforts to be to be
noble,
patriotic, and I think you
even
have a bit of that.
Even after Iraq.
We don't learn our lessons, do we? And I don't think that's unique to America. I think the UK certainly has plenty of that.
Sure,
but
just not quite as much.
Right, and we just happen to be one of the most dangerous forces of empire at the moment, so it gets a bit blown out of proportion. But no, we don't have there's no real robust left here, but we've been trying to change that in the past few years, and we'll see what happens.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. How do we read your newsletter, Luke?
Probably the best way to find me would be to go on Twitter, and it's Luke O'Neill 47, and you can find all my articles there.
Excellent. That's O'Neill with one L, Luke O'Neill 47. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, Luke. I'm glad, really, that you're not going to actually fund for escalators. I was slightly worried about it before we talked. Thanks for joining us. Let me see what I've got now. JPT Cartoons says, George, how come there's very little footage of these drones flying in a built-up area in broad daylight with the world's media present? Also, thousands of disgruntled passengers with video-equipped mobile phones hanging around, plus the plane spotters. Strange. It is actually a bit strange, I've got to say. Robert Chalmers says, while we always expect the highest quality of articulate and intelligent debate for George Galloway on Talk Radio, who would have foreseen the best and most insightful analysis of the Gatwick drone farce? Well said. Robert's a very distinguished man, and I'm grateful for his approbation. Let's take a break. Where's Doogie when you need him? 0344 499 1000. That's the number to call. You can email me, you can text me, and of course, you can tweet me at George Galloway at Talk Radio. I want calls. I want women's calls. I want calls that disagree with me. I want first-time calls, perhaps above almost anything else. I want calls from anyone at all on the issues that we have been talking about, which are, roughly speaking, the panto season in the British Parliament? Did he or didn't he say what the mass media are in mass hysterics about, in claiming that he said? Are we really in the grip of so few problems that is the item we should fixate on? Are we really so emaciated as a country that we cannot defend our airports from drones that anybody can buy and fly? If we are, we're in big, big trouble. Now that ill-wishers have discovered you can cause tens, maybe hundreds of millions of pounds worth of economic damage just by buying a £19.99 drone from Halford's. Other stores are available. Chris says, although I approve of withdrawal, I tend to be alarmed when America makes an announcement which softens its stance regarding Syria, as this is usually seen to be followed by an unexplained chemical attack. Let's hope this isn't the case this time. Good point, Chris. Matt Green says, you try shooting a drone hundreds of feet in the air in the middle of a windy open field with an air rifle. You'd have better luck throwing the pellets at it. Good point. Phil Nielsen says, Americans, Liberals, Hollywood and in fact the world are up in arms over the Mattis resignation because Mattis represents stability and maturity of judgment for the US government. In the last 2 years, Mattis has stopped Trump from setting the world ablaze. And David says the elites have nearly finished with the poorest people. We have nothing left to steal. The new target is the middle class. You have lots to steal. Do you expect us to defend your rights? Which we will do, by the way. We are the sovereign power, not the government. And John Granger Mills says, why not use man-lifting drones to get people over the wall, George Galloway? No one can stop them. Here's the legend. That is Norma in Bristol. Norma, no show is complete. Welcome.
I can't help myself, George. I just want to say, actually, that this show is the best discussion show on the radio.
I think so, on any station, including this one. Unfortunately, I don't get many other opportunities now as I did in the past. And as you know, there are people gunning for us. So keep your fingers crossed, Norma.
Well, it educates me, George, and I look forward to it every Friday.
Thank you so much.
But apart from all the other interesting subjects tonight, I always have to change it slightly because what came up on the television was to do with these 71 servicemen this year who've committed suicide. Now, they suffer from this post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what it's called, isn't it?
PTSD. Yeah.
That's right. And, I was against the war in Afghanistan as well as Iraq, but these servicemen, under their orders, they probably did what they were trained to do, for the best of their ability. And then later on, they suffer from PTSD and they commit suicide, and I think it's really sad.
Let me tell you something, Norma. Tony Blair once solemnly intoned at the dispatch box the names of 5 British soldiers that had been killed that week in Iraq. He said, we will never forget them. I bearded him in the corridor outside the chamber, and I said, repeat those 5 names of the people you are never going to forget, that you just told the country and their parents that you'd never forget them. Give me one of their names. And he could not. Because the truth is, we march these soldiers off to war with straw hats and trumpets and military parades, but we don't give a toss about them when they come back.
It's right. And I mean, to be honest, George, you're absolutely right, but it's so sad that these relatives that were on the television tonight, I mean, especially as it's Christmas, they don't feel they can sort of able to enjoy it. And I don't know. I mean, I do hope that everybody enjoys their Christmas and it's not all sad, but there's so many sad things about that it does sort of bear on your mind, doesn't it?
Of course, sometimes you lose the will to live, actually, reading, as I do, news on a pretty much 24/7 basis. There's a lot of evil in the world. But staying on the serviceman's point, Jim Davidson, who does the Care After Combat, and if you're listening, Jim, I'm waiting for that funding pledge for the Killing Kelly film that you promised me. The reality is our prisons, our homeless numbers, the mental health system are all disproportionately presenting ex-service people, all of them. There are more soldiers than there ought to be in all three of these sectors, and the politicians who sent them off to war simply don't give a damn.
No.
Norma, I wish you a Merry Christmas, my dear, and stay, please, always a legend in our hearts. David says, the elites have nearly finished. No, I've done that one. Edwina. No, David says, Magna Carta, Article 61. Look into it, George. I did. Or rather, Tamer did. Article 61 of the Magna Carta was superseded by Britain becoming a parliamentary democracy. The Magna Carta had some pieces in it that were incorporated into British law. The right to armed rebellion in the state was, unsurprisingly, not. Edwina says, I had to switch George off when he wasted airtime on the drones. It's just another sleight of hand to deflect from May's useless week in the House. If a police marksman cannot be deployed for something this simple, then what hope when the big bad boys hit? I don't think so, Edwina, because actually this drone fiasco makes the government look even worse than it would have looked without them. I don't think it diverts attention from their incompetence at all. Joe in Prestatyn says, did I hear right? He's talking about the American colonel. These little islands maybe, but we've got a big history. You did hear right, Joe. It's one of the reasons why I got a bit hot under the collar. Paul Anderson says, photography and videography. You need a pretty hefty one to carry a UHD camera, though they are getting smaller. A chum of mine who makes films for a living had to get all sorts of licenses to fly his, but buying it was straightforward. No, and let me respond to some who are making that point. I enjoy drone photography and drone filming and footage in movies and documentaries and so on. I may even invest in it a little for the Killing Kelly film that I'm now making. I get that. But that's a different thing from selling it to any Tom, Dick or Harry who can then take it down to the perimeter fence or anywhere within a few miles and fly it over our airports and cause total devastation. Let's hear from Grayson in Caterham, because that's always worthwhile. Grayson, welcome.
Hi, George, and happy Christmas to you.
Thank you.
I wanted to raise, since it's the pantomime clown season, there was plenty of nonsense in the House of Commons this week, but there's also some nonsense down at Islington Council, where a letter sent in by a non-resident complaining that if Gilad Atzmon turned up to do a concert with the Blockheads, he might actually have to give his ticket away. The council has decided to ban the entire concert, which is completely outrageous. And 3,000 people, I understand, have written in to complain, lodged a complaint, including no doubt those people who are looking forward to the concert. And apparently the council have also engaged a quite expensive legal team to defend any kind of action. And it seems a complete travesty. I wasn't aware that Islington Council, like any other local government authority, was awash with so much cash that it can waste such things.
Well, it's quite a vexed subject, as you know, and we don't have anyone here that will put the opposing point of view. The objection is that Gilad Atzmon, an Israeli Jewish man who served in the Israeli army and who's one of the world's most famous and best sax players, is playing in the Blockheads, formerly Ian Drury in the Blockheads, Ian Drury of fond memory, of course. The objection from some people is that he is an anti-Semite. notwithstanding that he's an Israeli Jew who fought in the Israeli army. On that point, I'm not really qualified to opine because there's nobody here to put the opposing point of view, and I'll only get into further difficulties if I do. I am entitled to say this, though. To try to deny a saxophone player the right to earn his living as a saxophone player, especially one as eminent as him, man who was in Pink Floyd, man who is in the Blockheads, seems draconian in the extreme. You might be able to make an argument for stopping him making political speeches, because, as you know, I'm not in favour of unlimited free speech. I'm certainly not I'm not in favour of racist free speech. You might be able to make that case, but you would find it difficult, I think, to make the case that he's not allowed to play the saxophone when that's how he makes his living. Thank you, Grayson. Bob Justice says, I'm not trying to be funny. Well, I am. Post-truth. You don't need a 1999 drone to disrupt an airport. What about pigeon fanciers? We've had them for years. And what did many northern blokes who had pigeons also used to have? Allotments. Hashtag Corbyn done it. And Derek from Dundee says, I hope this will finally mark the end of years of US overseas wars, which have ended in nothing but disaster in the countries they have invaded and intervened in. Without Mattis and the other neocons influencing him, President Trump will be free to pursue his American first foreign policy, which will make America and the whole world a more peaceful place, unless he decides to change his mind and launch airstrikes again. Well, you'll recall what the Lieutenant Colonel said. He felt that the Pentagon would roll the president over on this, and he may be right. Fra says, is Trump really trying to extort more money from the Saudis, as he once championed the idea that if Saudi wanted America to stay in Syria, they would need to finance it. And Jimmy says, time for the last hour and a bit of Mr. George Galloway on Talk Radio while my daughters get ready for bed. So just want to wish you and your family, George, a very Merry Christmas, and to all the listeners of the mother of all talk shows. Thank you, Jimmy. Indeed, and to you and yours also. Archie says, Talk, Santa got me a high-vis jacket. It's what I've always wanted. High-vis yellow jacket, Archie. And Big Al says, George, been a good year and bad, but one thing I can say, thank you and all the team on bringing our thoughts together. Thank you and a Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you, Al, for that. Now, a new caller, Fred the Red in Buxton in Derbyshire. Go ahead, Fred.
Hiya, George.
Hi.
It's a great honour. I'm a big admirer.
Thank you, my friend.
It was just a thought I had to help Donald Trump out with his £13 million. If he was to take a leaf out of the UK construction industry book and hired some cheap foreign labour, possibly Mexicans, that 13 million might go a bit further.
Yeah, although it'll not go anywhere near a $20 billion wall.
Well, I don't know. Those Mexicans have probably worked for, peanuts.
Well, Mexican workers are not as lowly paid as they used to be, and they've just elected Mexico's Jeremy Corbyn as their new president. So Mexico is no basket case anymore. But when you think about it, when you think of all the things you could do with $20 billion, the idea of putting it into a nearly 2,000 mile long wall, it's a bit perverse, don't you think?
Well, perhaps free Medicare.
Well, that would be a revolutionary idea in the United States, but yeah, that would definitely be one of them. Thanks, Fred, for that. First call, don't make it your last. What would you like me, if I could set up a GoFundMe for anything you'd like? Let me know. Yeah, a bit of Christmas cheer for you. Tell me what you'd like me to fundraise for. Jim, BFAWU, says America has certainly paved the way and provided the conditions for it to happen. Who's to say whether or not that's Erdogan's intent? Certainly America has opened the door for Turkey to target the Kurds. Darren Thompson says, I just want to say, George, I absolutely love your show, and I've learned so much from you, and I just want to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a very prosperous New Year. Long live the mother of all talk shows. Darren, that's very lovely. I don't know how long it will live. Well, I do know it'll live as long as I've got breath. If I'm not doing it here for any reason, I'll do it somewhere else. And I hope you'll all follow me. John says, a good time for hedge managers to invest in anti-drone companies. A very good point. I'm just wondering, I know it's a bit unkind, but does Donald Trump have any pecuniary interest in building a 1,954-mile long wall? Is he in cement, concrete, metal? Is he in construction? Is anyone on his behalf? Just a thought. Jazz says, talk, make it up, Tears for Fears. George, Mad World would be an apt song. You could not buy Jazz in Brighton. Confused the way you've written that, but I get your point. Here's one. George, there are many pics in today's papers that show something in the sky. The question is it a drone or UFO time travellers? That's absolutely true. I'm not sure, though. You can no longer believe what you see in the newspapers. You can no longer believe a picture because that picture could be photoshopped. An object could be placed in that picture. How would you know? There's certainly a dearth of evidence that there are any drones over Gatwick. Personally speaking, my sense of disbelief in the state and the media has not quite reached the depths that I don't believe them, that there is not a drone problem over Gatwick Airport. I do believe them. What I cannot understand is why we are so woefully unprotected from it. Now, the reason I played that is because that is what's going to dominate the first couple of months, perhaps 3, perhaps many more, of our lives. The EU as Hotel California. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. And it's Hotel California as in that hotel in The Shining, filled with horrors and people smashing their faces through the fascia in the bathroom saying, "Here's Junkers." It's going to be a nightmarish few months because our democracy is at stake. Our economy, our future as a country is existentially threatened by the current impasse in Parliament. A 17-day holiday, Parliament shouldn't be on holiday at all. They should have had their Christmas dinner subsidised in the canteens of the House of Commons. They could have toasted in the new year at the 1970s Life on Mars prices in the House of Commons 29 bars. They should have stayed in Parliament until they fixed this thing. There is absolutely no justification whatsoever for postponing the meaningful vote, none whatsoever, until possibly the 21st of January. Because every single day that goes by without this thing being fixed is imperiling our entire position in the world, in political, economic, financial, and diplomatic terms. It is a scandal that Parliament has risen at all for the Christmas New Year holidays. It is even more scandalous that the days of Tuesday, or rather Wednesday and Thursday, were entirely wasted in an utterly synthetic row over the issue of Stupid Woman Gate. It is criminal, actually, what's happening in this country now. And unless we can resolve this impasse, and you know my preferred resolution, if Parliament cannot decide then dissolve the Parliament and elect a new one. If you're going to have another referendum, then the only legitimate questions on that ballot paper would be Theresa May's deal or a world trade exit from the European Union. Any referendum in which Remain is on the ballot paper is entirely illegitimate. And I'll tell you what, Magna Carta, Article 61 or not, there will be trouble in this country. Social peace will be endangered in this country. So get used to Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Lee Gazy has an idea of a GoFundMe page. He says, can we have a GoFundMe page for the new Spurs manager if Pochettino goes to Manchester United? Which gives me an opportunity to say farewell to Jose Mourinho, who'll always be a special one to me. I'm sorry that it didn't work out all that well for Jose. It didn't work out nearly as badly as Manchester United's critics, even enemies, like to claim. He did win silverware, and he is a class act. But I could see that he was becoming increasingly unhappy in the job. And if the manager's unhappy, that's bound to spread. My main ire is for the misfits on £500,000 a year and only a little less, who have played so abysmally and shockingly for Manchester United, not for Jose Mourinho, because the people they were cheating were the people in the stands, were the kids watching for their results, the kids facing ridicule, like my own kids in school, because they were Manchester United supporters. That's for whom my ire is reserved. And in a way, they're on a hiding to nothing now. If they go out and play out of their skins and beat Cardiff City 5, 6 or 7-0 tomorrow, everyone will know they've been cheating all of this time. On the other hand, if they play like they've been playing, who knows where they're going to end up in the league. Pochettino? Well, maybe. Maybe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will do so well that he'll get the gig full-time, and you, Lee, can keep your manager. A couple of other written contributions. Tyler Durden says, George, have a very Merry Christmas to you, your mother, Gayatri, your kids, and the rest of your family. To Hobo Media, that's Kaz, to the Moats family and the talkRADIO family. How beautiful. You got all of us in, Tyler, and we're all grateful. And we reciprocate, believe me. Fra says, George, go fund to end the plan to balkanize Syria, destroy Palestine, decimate Yemen, and end all imperialist wars, the exploitation of the poor, the vulnerable, and the dispossessed. And Jane A. says, I guarantee if there were drones over the House of Commons, they'd be gone in minutes. Jane, don't give anyone ideas. John Locke says, wondering why the UK is so woefully unprepared to deal with drones over Gatwick. Chris Grayling, hold my beer. And Claire Piper says, drones are fun. We shouldn't ban fun. That's Claire, not from the South Terminal at Gatwick Airport, waiting for a plane for our holiday. And Speaker for the Dead says, no man's life, liberty or property is safe while the legislature is in session. Quote from Mark Twain. Let's hear from Chris in Brighton on drones. Go ahead, Chris.
George, we sat down together not so long ago, but it's great to
Oh,
speak
my
to you
dear friend, the champion of the world. Chris, thank you very much.
I don't want to say too much because, you see, I have taken the law into my own hands in the past, and you know that. But
yep.
I wonder, maybe should somebody, and not myself, of course, get up there and just make a citizen's arrest of this drone. But, George, you sound a bit upset. So I just want to leave you with a joke, if I may.
Yes.
What does one get if one crosses Nigel Farage with the late, great Tony Benn, God rest his soul?
What would one get? That is a very, very good question. Tell me.
Well, the answer, of course, is my great nemesis, Nigel Benn.
Very
Thank
good.
you very much, George.
Thank you, Chris,
I'm
and
in
God
heaven.
bless you and yours, all your family. That's the former champion of the world who only wants to be known as Chris for the purposes of the evening. Chris, thank you. That is a good one. Nigel Farage crossed with Tony Benn. Nigel Benn. I've been thinking a lot about Tony Benn recently. I put out some pictures of me and him earlier in the day. I always feel that he's a great loss to the politics and the culture of our society. I think a lot of people agree with me, that he's the best Prime Minister that we never had. And I think of him as a leader of the Brexit movement also. If he had led the Brexit movement rather than Nigel Farage, I think the margin of victory would have been greater. The quality of arguments would have been finer and nobler and higher. And Tony Benn is someone of whom, by advanced age and eventually illness, we've been robbed. But we should keep him in mind always. We should listen to what he said always. We should read what he wrote always. I do. He was a political, spiritual father to me. And for many, many years, I was close to Mr. Benn from the 1970s. I was a pillar. I was the Scottish pillar of his deputy leadership election campaign. I was extremely close to him for many decades. And to see him in full flight, to hear him in full voice, was really to see and hear something very, very special. Sean is in Waterloo in London. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, Sean.
Good evening, George.
Evening.
Yes. I wanted to just question the notion that the US in Syria were there to defeat ISIS. I just wanted to remind your listeners that when the US liberated Mosul in Iraq, a whole load of ISIS fighters were able to cross all those hundreds of miles of desert and retake Palmyra in Syria. And, you know, how on earth did they manage to do that? And just to another dimension on that same event is when the Russians, with the Syrian Arab army, took Palmyra away from ISIS earlier that same year, our former Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, when they, basically the Russians organized a classical concert in the amphitheater where a couple of weeks earlier ISIS had the civilians in there watching them cutting off heads and putting bullets through people's heads. When the concert was organized by the Russians, our former Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, said, quote unquote, it was distasteful. And I just think this gives an insight into where the United States and the deep state are over the issue of ISIS.
Well, I agree with all of that, but this is a good point to say, as I've been caning the American military earlier in the show. In 1944, when the American and British and other Allied forces left these shores to land in Normandy and begin the liberation of Western Europe, leaving aside all questions of the fact that that should have happened much earlier, a second front should have been opened much earlier, leaving aside the sacrifice on the Eastern Front and so on. The American military made a gigantic sacrifice on the beaches of Normandy and in the drive towards Berlin. And I have nothing against Americans. In fact, as you've heard me say before, Sean, I'm one of those who is the great-great-grandson of an American who, uniquely I expect, in the 19th century, emigrated from America to Scotland. She might have got on the wrong boat, but that's what she did. So I have American blood in my veins. I have no animus towards Americans at all, least of all their fighting men in the Second World War. But when I heard that Lieutenant Colonel and the level of self-delusion that was present in what he said, I must say, a shiver ran down my spine. Sean, thanks. You're the last call, unfortunately, because we've run out of time. My dear friend and colleague Ian Lee is up next, and I want to take a minute to salute him. Ian Lee is a giant of a man. He's a giant of a broadcaster. He is utterly brilliant, but he's also a man with the biggest heart in this building. He saved a man's life this week from this chair, speaking into this microphone. I'm sure he'll refer to it in his show when it comes up right after me in a matter of moments. But I wouldn't like to leave this chair without saluting Ian Lee and the great achievement of saving someone's life from a radio chair. If that doesn't win an award, then awards are not worth winning. It's been marvellous for me, and it has been all year. I'll be back again, God willing, and, well, with permission from certain quarters, next Friday at the same time. And we'll review the year properly, look forward to the new year properly. But until then, I wish each and every one of you a happy and peaceful Christmas.